The idea of an MC didn't used to just be somebody that said rhymes. It was somebody that was in charge of the event and somebody that was in charge of the space. And to be an MC, you had to be somebody that people trusted with that position. And I've seen Caz MC many times, and he's just, you can tell, and I'm sure you can tell now, the second he walks on stage, you're like, whatever that guy tells me to do, I'm going to do it. Because he obviously knows what he's doing. So, an example of this that I just wanted to lead off with was at Zulu Nation anniversary about 10 or 12 years ago. I think it was in Harlem at the National Black Theater on 125th Street. KRS-One was performing, and MC Shan happened to be in the crowd, and as you know, one of the famous battles of hip-hop history between KRS-One and MC Shan back in the 80s. And so he called MC Shan up on stage just to introduce him to the crowd. And people started saying, people wanted them to battle. And people were yelling, and Shan, he didn't expect to perform or anything. And he didn't want to do it, and people started booing. So Grandmaster Caz jumped on stage, took the microphone from KRS-One, which incidentally, I suspect he's probably the only person in the world that can actually take a microphone from KRS-One successfully. So that tells you something. And basically just said to the crowd, look, this guy has paid his dues, he's an important historical figure in hip-hop, and you shouldn't boo him, you need to respect him. Got off stage, and this is my favorite part, got off stage, turned around, went back up on stage, grabbed the microphone again, and then just said, I shouldn't even have to tell you that shit. He shamed the audience. This is like 3 o'clock in the morning in Harlem. 30 seconds earlier, they were booing, and then immediately they're like, yes, sir, sorry, sir. and that's the kind of power. I couldn't do that. 99% of the people in that room couldn't do that. It was because they respect him and what he's accomplished, and they trust him to run the evening. So my question, following up on that, is basically to ask you to talk about that. The idea of controlling the crowd, did you develop it as a skill? Do you have particular techniques? Is that something that you think about as you're emceeing? And what is its relationship to your origins in the Bronx?
Well, the letters MC stand for Master of Ceremony, of course. But hip-hop slang, MC stands for mic controller. And you don't just control the microphone, but you control the environment when you're an MC. As far as my mindset is concerned, is to control the entire environment while you have the stage, while you have the mic. When I speak into a mic, I speak into a mic like I mean what I'm saying. And so when you listen to me, okay, yeah, for real? Because I want you to understand and I want it to come through. So, as far as commanding the audience, I think if you come like you mean business, if you're sincere, and like you said, people trust, they trust you and they respect you, then you can command an audience. And that's what I've done for 40-something years.
Is that something that was part of your personality before you became an MC?
Well, it was part of I adapted that, and made that something in the forefront of my personality because I'm basically shy. To be honest with you. For real, if it wasn't for hip-hop, I'll be sitting in a corner somewhere, you know what I mean? But hip-hop is my voice, and it gave me my voice, and that voice is strong, and it knows what it is, who it is, and what it wants to say, and hopefully I come across that way.
So there had to be a point where you just sort of wound up on stage, and initially, and had to figure out what you needed to do to accomplish what you were trying to accomplish. Do you remember that? Not necessarily that specific moment, but that process of where, because rhyming was only part of it. I've seen you engage crowds in a variety of different ways. Did you sort of develop a bag of tricks for that? Did you think about like radio DJs or other people that you had seen address crowds?
Well, a few things. First of all, as a kid, I was a ham sandwich. So there was never a problem getting me to stand up in front of the class or speak or anything. I'm the first one up there and the last one to leave. So I never had a problem, with an audience or speaking in front of an audience, and that helped me a lot. Once hip hop came along, the competition of it made you step up, your game a little something. If anybody came along who you felt was anywhere near you competitively or something, or maybe past you, then your goal and your aim, my goal and my aim was to get past that person, to be better than that person, to command an audience better or more. Everything is to the fifth power with me. Okay, so I think because of you had to have that kind of attitude back in those days, not just coming from the Bronx, which of course I am born and raised in the Bronx, and for that time period, but there were a lot of powers going on at that time. I mean, we weren't in a gang, and gangs were the guys who had the power in the neighborhood. So whatever you chose to get into, you had to assert that kind of power in whatever it was you did. So I inserted that into hip hop. So everything I do, whether it's DJing, I was a B-boy, believe it or not, a lot of years and a lot of pounds ago.
Can I just jump in? Kaz is one of the only people I've ever seen DJ and MC at the same time. Like literally at the same time.
Simultaneously,
Yeah.
cut for myself. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, but all of those things together, I mean, the competition really just made everybody want to step their game up and just be a little better and a little more than the next guy. And I think maybe I had that a little, deeper than most people. I'm a little extreme with it, but it put me in the position that I'm in now.
All right. Mr. Conzo.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, one of the things I think people in hip-hop know Joe Conzo because of his hip-hop bona fides, however you pronounce that. He comes from a very prominent family in the Bronx as well. And my question is about how that experience influenced you. Your grandmother was Dr. Evelina Antonetti, a very important Bronx activist, founder of United Bronx Parents, who's widely known by people from the Bronx. Your father is Joe Conzo Sr., who's a very important figure in the Latin music scene in New York over the course of a lot of years. Also, in addition, people, this was not mentioned before, but I think it bears repeating, as an EMT, you're not only an EMT, you're also a 9/11 first responder, and also vice president of the EMTs union of New York City as well. So, a union man, and a labor activist, and I'm curious about that the whole thing of activism from your grandmother, Latin music, connection to the community and to the people, collective action, all those things, how that influenced your perspective on hip-hop.
Well, thank you for that, Joe. I guess it was instilled in me at a young age. My grandmother was known as the Hell Lady of the Bronx. She's instrumental in starting bilingual education in public schools in the early 70s. Thank you. She's instrumental in starting the summer lunch programs and the summer breakfast programs. And she had no problem telling the United States Congress to shut up and listen. You work for us. We don't work for you. You do for us and we'll do for you. And you don't see that too often now today. But as a kid, my playground growing up were demonstrations at City Hall, demonstrations at the Board of Ed, and, those things. And I just happened to have a camera with me, okay? So, I'm known for my hip-hop photography, as you see here, but, my body of archives is so much more. Like you mentioned, my dad, Joe Conzo Sr., was Tito Puente's personal confidant, producer, public relationship for up until the day he died. So when I wasn't hanging out with Caz and the Cold Crush Brothers and shooting them, my high school buddies, I was hanging out on my dad's coattail shooting Tito Puente, Celia Cruz, Hector Lavoe, and all of them. And when I wasn't with my dad, I was being strung along with my grandmother to all these demonstrations. So, it just resonated in me as I grew older. I just became part of the labor movement where I became a delegate, working for the New York City Fire Department. And now I'm the vice president of the largest union that represents EMTs and paramedics in the country. question that I get asked a lot when I travel is like, how was it growing up in the Bronx at the time? And I was like, fine. I turned out well. It was fine. You know, those abandoned buildings, that was our playground. Right, guys? That abandoned car, you know, you can hide in there. When you're playing hot peas and butter and they're trying to, you know, beat your butt with a belt. So, you know, I tell people I don't miss what I never had. You know, I didn't grow up with the house and the white picket fence, so I never missed it. So, you know, when I get asked those questions, it was fine. We made the best out of it.
A lot of times people ask me the same thing, and I say, well, I mean, growing up in the Bronx during that time, it was all we knew. So it's not like, oh my God, the buildings are missing. The buildings are just missing. You know what I mean? You ask a kid in Beirut, I mean, heck, why? How'd you grow up? How'd you survive over there? And you're like, yo, we know 2 o'clock the bombs is coming, we going to shelter, you adapt, and that's what we did, and it was nothing strange about how we grew up, because it's all we knew. I'm just saying if conditions have been different, because there's other people that we learned we met or later on in life, and they come from different backgrounds, and you can tell the differences on how we are because of the differences where we grew up and how we grew up. I mean, especially in hip hop. Okay, because like all the cats from Queens, you know what I mean, who like the rap guys from Queens, Run DMC and LL Cool J and all those guys, that next era, those guys lived in Queens, man. In houses. They lived in houses. All right, both of their parents was together, they had grandmothers, you know what I mean?
At dinner at 5 o'clock every day.
You know, so, you know, those kind of things, as opposed to us who, you know, we're pretty much here left to our own devices here in the Bronx. So, you know, we wound up doing the same thing, but with different mentalities.
You know, we have this image looking back on it that these jams were like just straight up b-boy jams, where they were just playing breaks and everybody was breaking and everything. And he was saying, no, I mean, we would have liked that, but if that happened, then all the girls would have left. Then we would have been in a jam with no girls. So then we would have.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
In the early days of breaking, I mean, like, I was a b-boy in the early days, and the guys that preceded me, people like Sasa, James Bond, and El Dorado Mike Mike, and the Nigga Twins, all of these were the premier b-boys back in the days, but these were the older guys in the neighborhood, and by the time, you know, we got to the point where, you know, we wanted to be b-boys, you know what I mean? We were the next generation, but b-boying almost died out because you can't ask a girl to dance.
What's up, Ma? How you doing? What's your name? You want to dance? All right, you grab her hand and you bring her over to the dance floor, and then you turn your hat back with the stump.
What you think she gonna do? So that wave of b-boys kind of just like, hey, we gonna leave that alone. And until the Latinos got involved in hip hop, I mean, not in hip hop, but in breaking. The Latinos brought the dance back, and my brother sitting in the back, Crazy Legs and Rocksteady Crew. If you had to point to one person, okay, who brought this whole revolution back to a new generation, it was him and the Rocksteady Crew. So basically that's what it was. Girls in parties, in hip-hop parties, once that breaking started, they started clearing out, okay? But a whole party wasn't just breaking, like he said. We played some disco songs. We played Cheryl Lynn, To Be Real, you know what I mean? We played Good Times. A lot of those disco songs wound up being hip-hop songs, okay? But the idea was to cater to the kids, to the street. And once Apache came on, a big circle opened up in the middle of the dance floor. And all that hustling stopped, and all that, and everybody concentrated on the b-boys. And b-girls.
Are there things that you see from your perspective as aspects of hip hop that it's like, oh, this could have only happened in New York, or this could have only happened in the Bronx. Whether that's aspects of hip hop or like moments in New York history, like maybe the blackout or some.
Caz has another great story about the blackout.
Back in the summer of 1977, right? One of the hottest days of the year.
Yes,
okay, one of the hottest days of the year, right? So we decided, well, we're going to play music out in the park today. Now, there's this other crew, they want to battle us. All right? The most epic thing you can do in hip-hop is have a battle. So they brought out their equipment, and they're setting up in the park. They got these big speakers and all that stuff. And I set up right next to them. Now, they played first, but they're playing disco music. So I'm like, who's worried about these guys, right? So now it's my turn to play. So I put my record on. I'm like, yo, when I drop this record, this party gonna go crazy. Everybody gonna go crazy. So I put the record on, I let it go. Boom! Bop, bop, boom, boom, bop, boom, 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 bop. Everybody like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm like, I got this battle won, right? So I go to put on the next record, right? And now this record, I won. Once this record dropped, I won this battle. I get it ready, get it a little zugga zugga, zugga zugga. Then I let it go. The turntable cut off. And now I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. I'm gonna lose. I can't. This is no good. And the turntable cut off. So I went back to the other turntable, and that turntable cut off. And then the mixer cut off. And then the amps cut off. And then the other guy's equipment cut off. And then all the lights in the street started going out one by one. Poof, 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 poof. And it was dark. It was totally dark. It was pitch dark. And everybody was like, oh my God, what's going on? What's happening? What's going on? You know what I did? I stood up on my speakers like this. I won. I blew off the whole street. But it wasn't me. It was the blackout of 1977. The entire city went dark for 72 hours. Now, once we got wind of what was going on, that this wasn't us who had blown out, that this was an actual New York City blackout, everybody got the same idea at the same time, which was, hit the stores! Let me tell you, they rushed out of that park like a tidal wave, headed for the Grand Concourse, okay? And when I say they looted the stores, they looted the stores, every store, jewelry stores, department stores, candy stores, bicycle shops, anything that had a gate on it, that gate came down that night. So the bottom line is that the next day, there was a new wealth among the people. And a lot more DJs started popping up.
New York City, especially the Bronx, was like a melting pot. You know, so many different ethnic ethnicities going on. Doo-wop came out of the Bronx. You know, salsa, Latin jazz, hip hop, and hip hop to me is like the only genre of music that kind of like borrows from all other different kinds of music. You know, Caz wrote rhymes to Gilbert O'Sullivan. You know what I mean? Why? Because growing up, we didn't have FM radio. We listened to AM radio, Cousin Brucey, you know, and Harry Harrison. So, you know, that paid.
I remember you had a rhyme that was to that McDonald's commercial. Hold the pickles, hold the lettuce.
Not me.
Oh, not
I don't want credit for that.
all right, sorry. Somebody
I thought, you know, in the early days, like, you know, there were a lot of groups in hip hop, as opposed to today, all solo artists, or we might find a duo, but pretty much everybody's solo. In the early days, there were a lot of groups, you know what I mean? The Cold Crush 4, the Fantastic Five, the Treacherous 3, the Notorious 2, you know what I mean? But once rap music came into play, that's a lot of ways to split money. So the group's kind of shortened down into, you know what I mean? And after a while, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this by myself. But economics played a big part in changing the face of hip hop and the reasons why people get involved with hip hop in the first place. For some of us, like myself and Joe, hip hop was our saving grace. You know what I mean? And for the generation who came after, like with rap music, they have a different agenda. It's like, yo, there's money in this. We can get paid. You know, we can do this. We can buy, you know, we can empower ourselves. We can, you know, feed our families. So, you know, their reasons for getting into hip hop and wanting to do it aren't as pure as the first generations was. And that's why you have a different sound, you have a different attitude, and a different appreciation for the culture. No, how many of you guys heard the story of rappers tonight, right? Yes? No? Here we go. Really quickly, edited version. Big Bang Hank in the Sugar Hill Gang, may he rest in peace, was a doorman at a hip hop club in the Bronx, and we became cool when I used to visit the club and we weren't performing. So me and Hank got cool, and I asked him to manage the group that I had at the time, because the Flash, Grandmaster Flash had a manager, and the Funky Four had a manager, and I figured it was time. So Hank agreed to manage my group, and the first thing he did was our manager was take out a loan from his parents, $2,000. And we used that money to fortify our sound system. All right, to pay back the loan, he got a job in a pizza shop in New Jersey called Crispy Crust Pizza. When Hank used to go to work, I used to lend him a little boombox to take with him, and the tapes that I used to make at home or our live shows, he'd go home and he'd be, I guess, making pizzas and lip syncing to the little boombox. And one day, some people walked in and seen him and said, "Hank, yo, Sylvia Robinson's sons are outside in the car, and they're auditioning people to become part of this group they put together. You should go out there." Because they thought Hank was an MC, because he was in there lip syncing to my tape. So Hank goes outside to the car. He doesn't say, "Well, guess what? I managed this guy named Casanova Fly in the Bronx." He just goes out there and repeats the stuff that's on the tape. They loved it, and they made him part of the Sugar Hill Gang. Imagine my shock and surprise when my manager got a record deal. See the attitude? That was my face when I found out. Really? And so I mean, the bottom line is that he came to me, he said, "Listen, these people want me to do this and that." I said, "Why you didn't tell them about me?" He said, "Well, you know, they just like my voice, so they wanted to use me." Yeah, okay, whatever, man. So he said, "I need you to write me some rhymes. We get ready to go in the studio." And I didn't really believe he was going to go in a real studio and do a record. So I threw a book of rhymes on the table. I said, "Yo, say this, and say that." I don't know how good them other guys are, but they ain't going to sound as good as you. He took the book, ran with it, came back a few weeks later with 2 copies of Rapper's Delight. And pretty much the rest is history. Bottom line is I was never credited as a writer on Rapper's Delight. I never received a dime from Rapper's Delight in 38 years. You know how many millions of dollars that was. I mean, you know what kind of museum we could have had if I would have had my money? But anyway, you know what I mean? Like, I moved on. That was a transition time in my life when the groups that I was in kind of disbanded. So me and the remaining members of the group that Hank managed, which was my brother JDL, we joined the Cold Punch Brothers. And that's when, you know, we got together with Joe and the rest of the group, and, you know, we became legendary in our own right. You know, but still to this day, I mean, Rapper's Delight still haunts me. You know what I mean? I mean, I could go to the club right now, they throw on Rapper's Delight, the whole club will stop and look at me like this. It's not funny. A lesser man would have been swinging from a chandelier by now. No, but pretty much I accepted my role in the song. I'm glad that I was a part of it, no matter which way it turned out. And hey, rest in peace to Big Bang King. Hip hop is a collection of elements, a music element, an art element, a dance element, and a spoken word element. And these elements have always existed in different forms. Hip hop is rock and roll, hip hop is jazz, hip hop is all of these genres that have come and gone. And hip hop takes and borrows from things that already exist. And hip hop didn't invent anything. It reinvented everything.
It's good to just be able to enjoy it. I hope you do my eulogy if I die before you. But I think the thing that people don't understand is that for a person like myself who is a generation behind Caz, and a lot of us that basically went through the same thing of having nothing and no options and no lights on Broadway as a dream or any kind of silver screen dreams or anything like that. So our goal was to look dope for each other, even if I was beating you in a battle. You know, we probably even became friends after I smoked a joint or stole some bread from a bread factory, whatever it was we had to do. If we weren't in MC, we all became each other's heroes. So people like Caz is him and between him and a dude named B-Boy Spy, those are like my first heroes. Because the only heroes we saw were cartoons. We didn't have the reality of saying, okay, I'm gonna go talk to Reggie Jackson today, you know what I mean? No, I'm gonna check out Grandmaster Caz at 129 Park or something like that. And for us being so considered the boogie down Bronx, but also being the burn down Bronx at the same time, all we had was waiting for the weekend, you know, and that whole week we practiced, waiting for that next jam to show off our skills, whether you were an MC, DJ, whatever it was, or next train coming out, you know, over the weekend, or that train that comes out on Monday after we bomb the system on the weekend. But we look forward to seeing our heroes, and being that we all came from dysfunctional homes, domestic violence, child abuse, all that shit was legal back then. But the thing is that because, you know, for me personally, it was all about the Cold Crush. I don't give a shit who came before or after. It was all about the Cold Crush for me. So to see people like Caz and all of them in the neighborhood and looking forward to them made my life have a sense of purpose. Because we couldn't afford the extracurricular activities like baseball and all these other sports that didn't exist in our communities. So that was our alternative form of recreation, was to rock with each other. So, you know, I think people like Caz and Conzo and Mel and everyone else, those were the people that kind of fed life to us and inspired us to be better, because we knew that the cream of the crop did it a certain way. And if it weren't for them, we wouldn't have, like he said, you know, you always wanted to step up your game. And they're the ones that forced us to step up our game in whatever element we did. So, yeah, thank you, Dad.
I know. I just want to say real quick. Before rap was a game or hip hop was a nation, before Lauryn Hill began her miseducation, before Bill was chilling on BD brought the noise, before Heavy D and the boys, before the roof caught on fire, before Fresh was the word, before Houdini and Friends and Roxanne's Revenge, before the Freaks came out at night, before Say Ho, before the Crashman was rocking on the radio. Before Whitney, Mariah, J-Lo, and Janet, before Bam and the Soul Sonic Force rocked the planet, before these other breaks, before Hard Times, before the Sugar Hill Gang, and before Super Rhymes, before Reaganomics, before rappers got shot in their stomachs, before you found hip-hop in comics, before G's, before weed was trees, before going Rondon gave you a deadly disease. Before haters, before thugs and perpetrators, before the alphas and before the betas, before beepers and cell phones and retro gods and FedEx and food stamps and Metro cards. Before cops was 5-0 or gas was answers. Before all the B-boys turned into breakdancers. Before legs was crazy or out turned to Swayze. Back when Joe said it's hot, humid and hazy. Before all the bull and by no means get this twisted. My name is hip hop and I have always existed.
I'm bold. And Charlie Chase will last, cause he's fast. And Tony Tone got pulled cause he's original. The cold crush is on, cause we perform. And even in a storm, we'll keep you warm. Hey crew, yeah Cap, we're gonna need a little scratch for the rap now. Tony Chase, yeah crew, you're the DJs, what you gonna do?